By the time the mobile task force arrived at the small Arizona township, it was already too late. You'd think it was the site of a massacre, and yet there were no bodies. The mobile task force fanned out on high alert, weapons at the ready, trying to put together what on earth had happened here. Site 45, deep in the Arizona desert, had intercepted a number of distressed posts and communications in the middle of the night. They had audio of frantic 911 calls, claiming there were giant monsters moving into the town, posts of impossible figures in the dark, panic messages to friends and loved ones who didn't think they had much time left. Worried that a town with a population of over 2,000 was under serious threat, the site had dispatched some of the rapid response teams to assess the situation and draw up a proper response. But this was no mere ghost town with no sign of any kind of alien presence. Quite the opposite. The town was practically in ruins. Buildings had been smashed open, crystalline fragments of glass were lying out on the streets. The very roads looked like they'd been cracked and buckled under immense weight. And stranger still, the broken roads looked like they'd been destroyed by footprints, and those footprints, other than being giant, looked disconcertingly human-shaped. And that wasn't the only strange evidence either. They found hundreds of bullet casings out on the ground, both inside and outside. One thing was clear. The people who'd been taken in this town hadn't gone down without a fight. But no matter how many bullets they fired, it didn't seem to save them. Half-ruined cop cars also lay abandoned in the streets, but the mobile task force couldn't help but notice that the cop cars had dash cams. Perhaps that would give them some indication about what they were really up against here. While some members of the team radioed back to the site for additional support, one of the more tech-oriented members of the mobile task force hacked into the databanks of the police cruisers with his PDA to watch the video footage. And only when he did that did he realize just how strange and terrifying the anomaly they were dealing with here was. The footage was taken in the middle of the night. The car raced down the street, a first-person POV from the dash through dark streets. The MTF operative could hear the voices of the two cops inside the cruiser. "Can't see a damn thing," one of them said.
"Streetlights are out," replied the other. "Whatever the hell we're dealing with must have taken out the power too."
"Whole damn world's coming to an end," the first cop replied. And that wasn't strictly true. It was just that their world was about to end. Suddenly, a huge, solid shape appeared in the beams of the cruiser. The vehicle squealed to an abrupt stop as the cops inside screamed and swore. They managed to miss the shape by inches, but now the operative could tell what it was. A giant, fleshy ankle, so huge that it occupied basically the whole of the view from the windshield. It then moved forward, disappearing out of view into the dark of the space beyond the headlight beams.
"What the hell was that?"
"We'll find out after it's dead," said the other, as the two scrambled to unbuckle their seatbelts and climb out of their car seats. The two cops came into view in the dashcam's POV. Both had unholstered their sidearms and were firing blindly into the dark, the shape they were firing at still out of view of the dashcam, until a giant human hand reached out of the dark and snatched one of them away with the reflexive speed of a person swatting a bothersome fly. The other cop kept shooting, because what else could he do? His friend was still screaming and begging in the dark, until a visceral crunching sound cut it off. The surviving cop was frozen in place, dry-firing his empty pistol, seemingly just locked in a repetitive motion, a mind completely broken by fear. A hand reached into frame and snatched him away moments later, and it was on this day that the Foundation received a grim reminder why it needed to contain the Titans. The mobile task force sent back the video files to Site 45 for wider distribution to surrounding sites and analysis from researchers and containment specialists. They were dealing with what seemed to be at least one, and possibly several, giant, aggressive, and possibly flesh-eating humanoids immune to conventional small arms fire. They are large, they are fast, and buildings wouldn't stop them. Casualties appeared to be over 2,000 already, at minimum. Site 45 dispatched a pair of high-speed attack helicopters immediately to sweep the surrounding several hundred miles. If these things made it to another nearby population center, the possibility of the casualties ballooning exponentially was high. That was the outcome they wanted to avoid at all costs if they were going to get this situation contained without needing to deploy mass containment procedures. After a 20-minute sweep, they first saw the monsters. A crowd of 10 impossibly huge figures, though their heights varied considerably. Naked but without genitals, their features warped and freakish, uncanny. The gaggle of deformed giants seemed to huddle together and walk inexorably in one direction, looking for the next source of nourishment, the next human settlement to ransack and ravage. And as it turned out, they were about 10 miles from the nearest town, from causing hundreds if not thousands more deaths. Researchers at Site 45 were watching a live video feed of these terrible anomalous creatures, the Titans. The project leader on the team gave her orders. I want evac and defense teams en route to the settlement immediately. Mobilize backup choppers and ground teams. Operatives already in the field, you are clear to engage. That was all the teams and the helicopters needed. They descended towards the huddled crowd of Titans. The door gunners unloaded reams of heavy-duty armor-piercing machine gun rounds on the humongous beasts. The bullets did clearly make an impact on the creature's flesh, but no lasting damage was caused. At most, some of the smaller instances flinched. "Doesn't look like we can hurt him, boss," one of the door gunners said into his radio. Back at Site 45, the team leader replied, "Then switch to missiles. Even if we can't kill or contain them yet, if we can alter their trajectory, we're more likely to save lives here." "Copy that, ma'am." The helicopters let a few stingers off the chain, sending them towards the marching Titans at incredible speeds. They made contact and exploded as the team waited for the smoke to clear. For the Titan who took a direct hit to the face, skin and flesh was blown away to reveal a section of grimacing skull underneath, but it still showed no sign of pain in spite of it. These monsters were terrifyingly durable. "We're gonna need some heavier ordnance," the pilot said. He didn't get to finish that sentence, because the apparent sluggishness of the terrible marching giants had lulled them into a false sense of security. They had been cruising just a little too low, and it was in that moment that one of the Titans took advantage. It lunged up, grabbing the chopper in its hand. It exploded in the monster's grip before anyone inside the chopper even had a chance to scream. The other choppers peeled away in panic, while back at the Foundation site, several of their live feeds of the Titans cut into static. These things could move with impossible speed when they wanted to, and were able to survive heavy firepower. If they couldn't get this situation under control quickly, they might need to call in Hammerdown, the battalion's strength mobile task force with heavy armed vehicles and weaponry. They are, for all intents and purposes, a true Foundation private army. However, any time that Hammerdown was deployed was almost always considered a failure. Any time you're deploying an entire army to fight monsters in the Arizona desert, you need to further deploy mass containment and disinformation measures to clear the whole thing up after. Not exactly an ideal scenario. As more helicopters and armored vehicles were dispatched, the Foundation also decided it was better to be safe than sorry, now that the body count from these monsters included Foundation personnel. They needed to send out their experimental unit to better ensure success. Mobile Task Force Omega-7, also known as Pandora's Box, one of the only Foundation mobile task forces to feature anomalous members. And of course, there was one that was particularly enthused to go up against giant, extremely strong, extremely fast, and extremely durable opponents. SCP-076-2, also known as Abel. The immortal warrior's only reason to exist was to indulge himself in his ultimate pleasure, fights to the death. Being freakishly strong and fast and impossibly skilled, thanks to his millennia of battle experience, most fights were unspeakably boring to him now, over almost as soon as they began. That's why he was always searching for worthy opponents, and perhaps these Titans would be exactly what he was looking for in that regard. But in the meantime, it was up to the non-anomalous human beings of the SCP Foundation to hold these monsters off. Tanks and other armored vehicles with fitted cannons and machine guns were scrambling across the desert, unleashing hell against the lumbering Titans. The Arizona desert was lit up with terrible ballistics as the projectile struck the thick skin of the Titans, causing the creatures to roar and drool that might be either pain, anger, or confusion. However, it did succeed in at least breaking the formations of the Titans, causing them to split and each start going after the different fast-moving vehicles like cats chasing a laser pointer. Meanwhile, other Foundation agents were performing a mass evacuation on the nearest town. using the pretense of a dangerous neurotoxin leak that could soon wash over the town and leave everyone dead in its wake. The problem was, not everyone in the town was willing to believe that. Some even holed up in their homes with weapons, claiming that the SCP Foundation was just a government plot to steal their homes. All the while, the threat of the Titans loomed closer. But while the regular Foundation soldiers were trying their best to distract and subdue the Titans, Abel and his Pandora's box brethren were en route, rapidly approaching the site of the chaos. When Abel saw the ginormous figures, he immediately drew a pair of obsidian blades and gritted his teeth in anticipation. Yes, these would be perfect. The ultimate punching bag to test out his skills without worrying about breaking his toys. This would be such a delightful little experiment. As the Chinook carrying them lingered high above the Titan contingent, Abel leapt out without a parachute, plummeting towards the Titans below. He knew that their flesh would break his fall, and he was right. 2 sandaled feet smashed against the top of a Titan's head like a missile, knocking it to the ground midway through chasing a Foundation all-terrain vehicle. Yes, he'd enjoy killing these monstrous things. With Abel and the Pandora's Box team on site, the Foundation forces felt like the tide had turned in their favor as more infantry troops entered the fray and began firing at the creatures with assault rifles, light machine guns, long-range sniper rifles, and even grenade and rocket launchers. Explosions and gunshots rang out all around, but most of the time, it just acted as a distraction rather than a meaningful way of actually hurting these unnatural creatures. Hurting them was Abel's specialty. He leapt from Titan to Titan, carving deep wounds with his weapons before leaping away again before they were able to grab him. Not all of the soldiers were so lucky. Multiple Mobile Task Force operatives were caught off guard, picked up and devoured by the hungry Titans. And even Abel was coming to some uncomfortable realizations here, as the wounds he struck in these monsters often seemed to heal just as quickly. "You're formidable opponents after all," Abel said to himself. And then, they got lucky. By pure chance, while in his berserker fury, Abel slashed across the napes of one of the Titan's necks. Immediately, a burst of steam came out of the wound, and the Titan collapsed to the ground, dead. And that was how the Foundation discovered the weakness of the Titans, and Abel was immediately able to modify his strategy accordingly. He jumped from opponent to opponent, slashing the backs of their necks until one by one, they all collapsed dead. Abel stood among them, laughing in victory. But not all was taken care of. The ground beneath the Mobile Task Force members began to rumble, and rumble really was the operative word here. It was a struggle to keep footing as the very earth seemed to shake and tremble. "What blasted sorcery is this?" Abel growled. Huge cracks snaked across the earth, splitting dirt and breaking into huge chasms where men fell screaming, and armored vehicles tumbled after them. Abel flipped back and was able to dance away as the debris fired up, moving from rock to rock until he was out of the danger zone. Many others on his team weren't so lucky. When his sandaled feet landed on firm earth again, he saw it. The glistening red musculature of a giant humanoid creature, an order of magnitude larger than even all the Titans they were facing before. It rose up, skull-like face contorted into a grimace. Its very shape blotted out the sun in the sky above. A colossal Titan. Abel smiled. "Then it seems our fight isn't over just yet." Now check out SCP-3999, I am at the center of everything that happens to me, and SCP-1730, What Happened to Site-13, the full story compilation, for more.